She Never Slept Again is not simply a horror story or a short script meant to scare the audience for a few moments, but rather it is a deep psychological exploration of how a single terrifying experience can permanently damage the human mind and destroy the most basic human function, which is the ability to rest, because sleep in this story is not treated as a normal biological need but as a symbol of safety, trust, innocence, and emotional balance. And once that symbol is broken, the character's entire existence collapses into a state of endless fear and awareness. The story carefully establishes a normal and almost comforting beginning to make sure the audience understands what is being lost, because without showing peace first, the horror would not feel meaningful. The protagonist is presented as an ordinary person living an ordinary life with routine nights and familiar surroundings, which subconsciously tells the audience that this could happen to anyone. And this relatability is a key element of the script's power, because the fear does not come from something supernatural at first, but from the idea that normal life itself can suddenly become unsafe. The turning point of the story usually occurs during a night or a moment of vulnerability, which is important because nighttime represents surrender and trust, when the mind shuts down and the body becomes defenseless. And the script uses this moment to introduce the central traumatic event, something that is often left partially unexplained, because unexplained horror is always more powerful than fully defined threats. And this moment shatters the boundary between dreams and reality, causing the protagonist to lose confidence in her own perception. After this incident, the phrase "she never slept again" becomes the foundation of the narrative, not just as a statement of insomnia, but as a declaration of permanent psychological damage. The script then slows down intentionally, focusing on the internal experience of the character rather than external action, showing how the absence of sleep leads to distorted thinking, heightened senses, constant paranoia, and emotional exhaustion. But instead of collapsing completely, the mind adapts in a dangerous way, becoming hyperalert, always searching for threats, never allowing relaxation. And this constant vigilance becomes a prison. The horror here is subtle and intelligent because it reflects real psychological conditions, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, and chronic insomnia, making the story feel disturbingly realistic. As the days pass, the character begins to experience hallucinations, blurred memories, and confusion between what is real and what is imagined. And the script intentionally blurs these lines for the audience as well, forcing them to question whether the horror is external or entirely inside her mind. This uncertainty is one of the strongest elements of the story because it mirrors the protagonist's own confusion. The world around her starts to feel artificial, distant, and hostile, and people who try to help often fail because they cannot see the fear, which highlights a powerful theme of isolation, showing how mental trauma separates individuals from society, because pain that cannot be seen is often ignored or misunderstood. The script uses repetition to show how nights become endless and days lose meaning. Time stops functioning normally, and life turns into a continuous state of survival rather than living. And this is where the story becomes deeply tragic rather than just frightening, because the audience realizes that the character is alive but no longer free. The lack of sleep slowly erases her personality, her emotions flatten, joy disappears, and fear becomes the dominant force controlling every decision. And yet she refuses to sleep, not because she cannot, but because sleep has become associated with danger, teaching the brain that rest equals vulnerability and vulnerability equals death. This psychological conditioning is extremely difficult to undo, and the script subtly suggests that even if the original threat is gone, the damage remains, which is why the title is absolute and final. There is no hope or recovery implied, only continuation. The story also explores the idea that the human mind needs darkness and rest to process reality. And without sleep, the mind begins to consume itself, replaying memories, exaggerating fears, and creating new horrors to fill the silence. The character's environment often reflects her mental state, with shadows appearing deeper, sounds becoming sharper, and silence becoming unbearable, all of which reinforces the idea that the real monster is not a creature but a broken mind, trapped in permanent alert mode. The script does not rely on traditional jump scares because its goal is not momentary fear but long-lasting discomfort, making the audience imagine what it would feel like to never again experience peace, to never again close your eyes without terror. And this is why the story lingers in the mind even after it ends. The ending is usually ambiguous or emotionally heavy, not offering closure but reinforcing the idea that some experiences permanently alter the brain, and survival does not always mean healing. Sometimes it simply means continuing to exist in a damaged state. The phrase "she never slept again" therefore becomes symbolic of lost innocence, lost safety, and the irreversible consequences of trauma, turning a simple sentence into a haunting conclusion about the fragility of the human mind and the terrifying truth that once fear rewires the brain, it may never fully let go, making this story not just a horror strip but a psychological warning about the power of trauma and the thin line between normalcy and madness.